You believe the handcuffs proved your authority, Marcus Calloway said beneath the flashing red and blue lights. They only preserved the evidence. 3 police badges rested inside clear evidence bags on the hood of a patrol car, their metal surfaces catching the cold glow of the emergency lights. Rain moved across the Maryland highway in silver lines, and the men who had worn those badges stood several feet away under the watch of state police supervisors. Sergeant Travis Cole no longer carried the confidence that had shaped every order he gave. Officer Jason Pike stared toward the wet pavement, while Officer Brett Nolan stood apart from them, his body camera still blinking. Marcus was no longer in handcuffs. His dark overcoat was soaked at the shoulders, but his posture remained straight and his voice never rose. Captain Laura Mitchell stood beside him. Internal Affairs Director Evelyn Brooks supervised investigators as they secured radios, access cards, camera files, and dispatch records. 12 minutes earlier, Cole had believed the black man before him had no authority, no witnesses, and no way to challenge the story that would be written after the stop. Now every changing explanation had entered a record he could not control. Marcus looked at the badges on the hood, then at the officers who had surrendered them. A badge does not make a decision lawful, he said. It only makes the person carrying it responsible for what happens next. Cole opened his mouth to answer, but Evelyn raised one hand. The time for shared explanations was over. 12 minutes earlier, Marcus had been driving alone along a state highway outside a small Maryland town. He had just left a confidential meeting about complaints involving a local patrol unit. Several black drivers had described stops without clear cause, questions treated as defiance, and written reports that did not match recorded evidence. A sealed folder rested on the passenger seat of his unmarked black sport utility vehicle. Inside were dates, statements, and 3 names that appeared repeatedly: Travis Cole, Jason Pike, and Brett Nolan. Marcus wore a charcoal suit beneath his overcoat. No uniform was visible. No marked escort followed him. Nothing announced that the 51-year-old man behind the wheel was the state police chief. He was not testing anyone. He was simply driving home when a patrol car appeared in his rearview mirror. It followed him through 2 intersections and stayed behind him for more than 2 miles. Marcus maintained 45 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. He signaled before changing lanes and kept a steady distance from the vehicle ahead. Still, the patrol car moved closer until its headlights filled the mirror. Then the emergency lights came on. Marcus slowed, activated his turn signal, and pulled onto the shoulder beneath a street lamp. He placed the vehicle in park, lowered the window, and rested both hands on the steering wheel. Sergeant Cole approached through the ring. His eyes settled on Marcus before they moved toward the dashboard or license plate. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked. Marcus answered calmly. "No, Sergeant. Please state the reason." Cole paused. "You were driving too slowly." Marcus glanced at the speedometer. "I was traveling at the posted limit." Cole's expression tightened. "License and registration." Marcus reached carefully toward his wallet. "Is slow driving the official reason for the stop?" Cole looked briefly at the body camera on his chest. "Your plate also came back unclear." Marcus handed him the documents and watched him avoid reading them. The reason had already changed. "Please state one official reason for the record," Marcus said. Cole stared at him for a long second. Then he pointed toward the road. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus looked directly at the blinking camera. "Then let the record show what happens next." Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped onto the wet shoulder with both hands visible. Cole moved back just enough to create distance, watching him with the suspicion of a man expecting resistance that never came. Rain gathered along Marcus's overcoat and fell toward the pavement in narrow streams. "Stand near the front of the vehicle," Cole ordered. Marcus complied and positioned himself beneath the street lamp. "For the record," he said, looking toward the body camera, "I provided a valid license and registration, and the stated reason for this stop has changed." Cole's jaw tightened. "You do not control the record," Marcus answered without hesitation. "The evidence does." Cole turned toward his patrol car and used the radio to request another unit. His description was brief and selective. He called Marcus a suspicious driver with questionable documentation, but he did not mention that Marcus had traveled at the posted speed, signaled correctly, or followed every instruction. Marcus listened in silence. The language sounded familiar. It matched the complaints inside the sealed folder, where ordinary questions had been rewritten as defiance and valid documents had been treated as suspicious because the officer had already decided the driver did not belong. Cole returned with Marcus's license still in his hand. "The registration does not match the vehicle classification," he said. Marcus looked toward the unmarked sport utility vehicle. "You said the plate came back unclear." Cole's eyes narrowed. "It returned a restricted designation. Then contact the agency connected to that designation." Cole ignored the request and looked through the passenger window. The sealed folder carried an official state police marking. "What is in that folder?" "Confidential state material." Cole gave a short laugh. "According to you." Marcus reached carefully into his coat and removed his state police identification. He held it forward without stepping closer. "Verify this through the State Police Communications Center." Cole took the card and studied it. The photograph matched. The identification number was current. The words Executive Command appeared beneath the state seal. Still, Cole handed it back without making the call. This could be outdated. Marcus returned the card to his pocket. "Verification will resolve that." Cole glanced at the blinking camera on his chest. "I decide what requires verification." Headlights approached from behind, and a second patrol car pulled onto the shoulder. Officer Brett Nolan stepped out and walked toward them through the rain. "What do we have?" he asked. Cole answered before Marcus could speak. "Possible false identification and a vehicle with restricted registration." Nolan looked at Marcus, then at the documents in Cole's hand. "Did dispatch confirm a problem?" Cole motioned toward the second patrol car. "Run the plate again." Nolan returned to his mobile data terminal and entered the number. The screen cast a pale light across his face. A few seconds later, his posture changed. He read the result twice, then looked through the windshield toward Marcus. Cole approached the open door. "What does it say?" Nolan lowered his voice. "The registration is valid. The vehicle is assigned to the State Police Executive Fleet." Cole leaned closer. "Anything else?" Nolan looked back at the screen. "The identification number returns as Active Executive Command." Cole's expression hardened. "Do not broadcast that." Nolan turned toward him. "Why not?" Cole glanced toward Marcus beneath the street lamp. "Because we have not confirmed who he is." Marcus had heard every word. He turned slightly toward Nolan's body camera and spoke with deliberate clarity. "My vehicle has been verified. My identification has been verified. I am requesting a supervisor." Nolan looked toward Cole. Cole looked away. Then another set of headlights appeared through the rain, and a third patrol car approached the shoulder as Officer Jason Pike arrived to support a version of events that was already beginning to collapse. Pike parked behind Nolan's patrol car and stepped into the rain with the confidence of someone who had already decided which version of events he would support. He looked at Cole first, then at Marcus, as though that order alone established who deserved to be believed. "What is the situation?" he asked. Cole answered quickly. "Restricted vehicle, questionable credentials, possible impersonation." Nolan moved away from his mobile terminal. "The registration is valid, and the identification returns as Active Executive Command." Pike glanced toward the black sport utility vehicle. "That does not prove he is authorized to possess it." Marcus remained beneath the street lamp with his hands visible. "My license matches the registration. My photograph matches the identification. The state police system confirms active status. I have requested a supervisor." Pike studied him for a moment, then looked through the passenger window at the sealed folder. "We need to inspect that." "No," Marcus said. His voice remained level. "The folder contains confidential state material. You may secure the vehicle and contact the issuing agency, but you may not open it without lawful authority." Cole stepped closer. "You are not in a position to give instructions." Marcus looked toward the blinking camera. "I am stating the limits of consent." Rain tapped against the patrol car roofs while Nolan glanced between the two senior officers. "Sergeant, we should call the State Police Communications Center. The terminal provides a verification number." Cole ignored him. Pike turned toward Nolan. "Did your camera activate when you arrived?" "It activated with the emergency lights." Pike's eyes settled on the small red indicator. "Turn it off until we determine what this is." Nolan stared at him. "It is already part of the record." The refusal was quiet, but the roadside seemed to narrow around it. Cole faced Nolan. "That was not a request." Nolan looked back at the terminal, where the same verified information remained on the screen. "The vehicle is legitimate. The identification is active. There is no reason to stop recording." Pike lowered his voice. Do not create a problem for the unit. Marcus heard every word. He had seen the same fear described in earlier statements. The fear that loyalty to fellow officers mattered more than loyalty to the truth. Cole turned back toward him. Where did you get this vehicle? It was assigned to me by the Maryland State Police. In what capacity? Verify my identification. Cole gave a short, humorless smile. People obtain convincing credentials every day. Nolan stepped forward. The identification number is linked to an active executive command record. Pike looked sharply at him. Do not repeat that over the radio. Marcus addressed Nolan's camera with deliberate clarity. My license is valid. My registration matches. My vehicle is verified. My identification is active. My supervisor request remains unanswered. Cole reached for his radio. Dispatch, show 1 detained pending investigation for possible impersonation. Nolan turned toward him. We already confirmed the documents. We confirmed a designation, Cole replied. We did not confirm the person. Marcus held Cole's gaze. The photograph matches. The license matches. The registration matches. What fact are you still waiting to discover? Cole did not answer. Pike moved beside him. We can sort this out at the station. Marcus recognized the pattern completely now. Every answer had created another question because the questions were never meant to find the truth. They were meant to delay it. Cole nodded toward Pike. Place him in handcuffs. Nolan stepped forward. Sergeant, there is no lawful reason to do that. Cole's voice hardened. That is an order. Marcus did not resist. He turned slowly, keeping every movement visible to the cameras. For the record, he said, I am complying. My identification was verified before this decision. Pike closed the handcuffs without force. The quiet metallic sound traveled through the rain. Marcus looked toward Cole's camera. You have now done exactly what the complaints described. Cole's expression shifted. What complaints? Marcus faced the highway, calm beneath the street lamp. The ones carrying all 3 of your names. Marcus stood beside the patrol car with his hands secured behind him, his posture straight and his breathing steady. Cole turned toward his body camera and began constructing a version of the stop that did not match the one already recorded. Subject displayed questionable credentials, refused to explain possession of a restricted vehicle, and became increasingly uncooperative. Nolan looked at him in disbelief. He answered every question. Cole continued as though he had not heard him. The subject also attempted to direct the investigation and restricted access to possible evidence inside the vehicle. Marcus turned his head slightly toward the blinking camera. I stated the limits of consent and requested lawful verification. Pike stepped closer. Stop talking. Marcus met his eyes. You are creating an official record. I am. Correcting it while the cameras are active. A sedan passed slowly in the nearest lane, its tires sending a light spray across the shoulder. The driver glanced toward the 3 patrol cars, the flashing lights, and the black man standing in handcuffs beneath the street lamp. Cole watched the sedan disappear into the rain. People see what they expect to see, he said. Marcus answered quietly. That is why evidence matters. Nolan returned to his patrol car and looked again at the mobile data terminal. The restricted executive command designation remained on the screen. Beneath it was a direct verification number for state police communications. He reached for the radio. Cole noticed immediately. What are you doing? Confirming the identification. I told you not to broadcast that information. I am requesting verification through the listed channel. Pike moved toward the open vehicle door. Close the terminal. We can handle this locally. Nolan looked at him. Why would we handle confirmed state police credentials locally? Pike lowered his voice. Because once command becomes involved, we lose control of the scene. Marcus heard the sentence clearly. Control. Not safety. Not verification. Not law. Nolan pressed the call button. State Police Communications, this is Local Unit 14 requesting verification of an active Executive Command identification and restricted fleet vehicle. Static filled the radio before a dispatcher answered. Unit 14, provide the identification number. Nolan read it slowly. Cole stepped away, his confidence tightening into silence. Pike looked toward Marcus as though he expected him to reveal something, but Marcus remained still. He did not announce his title. He did not demand special treatment. The process was finally moving where it should have moved several minutes earlier. The dispatcher returned. Unit 14, hold your position. Do not transport the detained individual. Preserve all body camera recordings and vehicle data. State Police Command personnel are responding. Nolan looked toward Marcus. Pike reached for his own radio. Can you confirm the identity over this channel? The dispatcher answered, identity. Confirmation is restricted. Maintain the scene and await command. Cole stepped closer to Nolan. Tell them the situation is under control. Nolan looked at the handcuffs, then at the verified data still glowing on the terminal. It was under control before we ignored the confirmation. Marcus spoke toward the nearest body camera. My license was verified before I was detained. My registration was verified before I was detained. My state police identification was verified before I was detained. My request for a supervisor was denied before I was detained. Cole pointed toward him. Stop making statements. Marcus's tone never rose. You may stop asking questions. You may not erase the answers. The rain softened to a fine mist, but the emergency lights continued moving across the highway. In the distance, a new set of red and blue lights appeared beyond the curve. Then another. Then a third. Pike stared down the road. How many units did they send? Nolan did not answer. Cole looked at Marcus with uncertainty replacing certainty for the first time that night. Who are you? Marcus held his gaze. The same man I was before you decided my documents were not enough. The approaching vehicles slowed and moved onto the shoulder in precise formation. Their markings were unmistakable. Maryland State Police. A black command vehicle stopped at the front of the scene. Its driver's door opened, and Captain Laura Mitchell stepped into the mist. Captain Laura Mitchell stepped away from the command vehicle and surveyed the roadside with one measured glance. 3 local patrol cars stood beneath the streetlights. Marcus remained beside the nearest cruiser with his hands secured behind him. The sealed folder was still visible through the passenger window of his unmarked sport utility vehicle. Cole moved toward Laura before she had fully closed the door. Captain, we have a possible impersonation case involving restricted credentials. Laura did not look at him. Her attention remained on Marcus. Release Chief Calloway. The words were calm, but they changed everything. Pike stared at her. Nolan looked from Laura to Marcus, finally understanding the full meaning of the executive command designation. Cole remained still. Laura repeated the order. Remove the handcuffs from the state police chief. Pike stepped behind Marcus and unlocked them. Marcus brought his hands forward slowly and adjusted the sleeves of his wet overcoat. He did not show relief. His face carried the same restraint he had maintained from the first question. Cole looked toward Laura. He never identified himself as the chief. Marcus turned to him. I provided valid identification. I requested verification. I requested a supervisor. My rank was not required for you to follow procedure. A second command vehicle stopped behind Laura's unit. Internal Affairs Director Evelyn Brooks stepped into the mist carrying a weatherproof evidence case. 2 state police supervisors followed her, each with a body camera active. Evelyn approached Marcus first. Chief Calloway, are you able to continue? Yes, Marcus replied. Preserve the scene before anyone begins explaining it. Evelyn nodded and immediately faced the local officers. All body cameras will remain active. No reports will be completed, revised, deleted, or discussed between officers until the electronic evidence is secured. Radios, access cards, mobile terminals, dispatch logs, and vehicle data will be collected under independent supervision. Cole's expression hardened. This was a lawful stop. Nolan answered before Laura could speak. The vehicle and identification were confirmed before the detention. Cole turned toward him. That is not the entire context. Nolan looked at the camera on his chest. The entire context is recorded. Evelyn instructed one supervisor to photograph the terminal screen before closing it. Another began documenting the camera identification numbers and radio units. Pike glanced toward Marcus's vehicle. The folder inside contains restricted material. We had reason to determine whether he was authorized to possess it. Marcus answered with quiet precision. You were given a valid license, matching registration, active state police identification, and a direct verification number. You chose not to complete that process until Officer Nolan contacted command. Laura faced Cole. What was the original reason for the stop? Cole paused. The vehicle was moving unusually slowly. At what speed? Approximately 45 miles per hour. Laura looked toward the posted sign visible farther down the road. The limit is 45. Cole shifted his explanation. The plate returned unclear. Evelyn stepped closer. And after the registration returned valid? Cole looked at Marcus. The restricted designation raised concerns. Concerns may justify verification, Evelyn said. They do not justify ignoring verification once it is complete. The roadside had changed. Minutes earlier, Cole had controlled every command, every radio statement, and every attempt to define Marcus as suspicious. Now each word was being compared against timestamps, camera footage, and system records he could not rewrite. Marcus walked toward the passenger side of his vehicle and looked through the window at the sealed folder. The people in that file said their documents were dismissed, their questions were called defiance, and their complaints were closed without full review. Cole stared at him. Was this some kind of operation? No, Marcus said. I was driving home. You created the evidence yourselves. Evelyn opened the weatherproof case and removed 3 clear evidence bags. Sergeant Cole, Officer Pike, and Officer Nolan, surrender your badges, access cards, and department-issued devices pending separate administrative review. Nolan looked down at his badge. Cole's voice sharpened. All 3 of us over one stop. Marcus met his gaze beneath the fading mist. No, Sergeant. The review is beginning because one stop may have confirmed what many people were already trying to tell us. For several seconds, none of the 3 officers moved. The evidence bags waited in Evelyn Brooks's hands while the red and blue lights traveled across their faces. Cole looked at Laura Mitchell as though she might reverse the order. She did not. This is an administrative measure, Evelyn said. It is not a final determination. Each officer will be reviewed separately, and every preserved record will be examined independently. Cole's voice tightened. We followed procedure. Nolan looked at him. No, we did not. Pike turned toward Nolan. Think carefully before you make this worse. Nolan held his gaze. I have been thinking about what I failed to make better. The sentence settled over the roadside. Nolan had watched the reason for the stop change. He had seen valid records confirmed. He had heard Cole order the result kept off the radio. He had remained silent until the facts became impossible to hide. Speaking now did not erase that silence, but it created the first honest break inside the unit. Cole stepped toward him. We can explain the inconsistencies once we review the report. Evelyn raised one hand. There will be no shared explanation. You will not discuss this incident with one another before separate interviews are completed. Pike glanced toward his body camera. Mine may have stopped recording earlier. Nolan looked at him. You told me to turn mine off. Pike's expression hardened. That is not what I said. The recording will show what you said. Evelyn instructed a supervisor to secure Pike's camera and document its operating history. Another supervisor collected Cole's radio, access card, and department-issued telephone. Cole removed his badge slowly and placed it into the first clear bag. Pike followed, his eyes fixed on the wet pavement. Nolan looked down at his own badge for several seconds before removing it and placing it into the third bag. Chief Calloway, he said. I should have spoken sooner. Marcus met his eyes. Yes, you should have. Nolan accepted the answer without defense. Marcus continued. Telling the truth late does not make the silence disappear. It only gives accountability somewhere to begin. Evelyn sealed the bags and placed them on the hood of the patrol car while an investigator prepared the evidence labels. 3 badges rested beneath the emergency lights, each representing a different level of responsibility, but none exempt from review. Cole looked toward Marcus. So Nolan will be treated differently because he turned against us? Marcus's voice remained even. He will be treated according to what the evidence shows. Cooperation does not erase participation. Laura opened the rear door of her command vehicle and offered Marcus a dry coat. He declined with a slight shake of his head. There are people in that folder who stood in weather like this much longer than I did. Evelyn looked through the passenger window at the sealed file. The investigation existed before tonight. Marcus nodded. Tonight did not create the concerns. It may have confirmed the pattern. Cole's eyes moved toward the folder, finally understanding that the man he had detained had been reviewing complaints connected to all 3 officers before the patrol lights ever appeared behind him. Marcus looked at the badges on the hood. You believe the handcuffs proved your authority, he said. They only preserved the evidence. The 3 sealed badges remained on the hood while Evelyn Brooks directed the roadside investigation with the precision of someone who understood how quickly misconduct could disappear behind paperwork. Each body camera was secured separately. Each radio transmission was copied from the communications system. The mobile data terminals were photographed before any screen was closed. The rain had weakened to a fine mist, but the emergency lights still moved across the wet pavement in slow red and blue waves. Cole watched the process with growing frustration. Pike stood several feet away, his hands empty, his attention fixed on the supervisors documenting his equipment. Nolan remained near the second patrol car with a state police investigator beside him, preparing to give an independent statement. Marcus stood near his black sport utility vehicle and watched the truth separate itself from the version Cole had tried to create. Evelyn approached with a preliminary evidence sheet protected beneath a clear cover. Chief Calloway, the timestamps confirm that your vehicle and identification were verified before the detention, she said. The stated reason for the stop changed 3 times. Marcus looked toward Cole. How much time passed between verification and the handcuffs? Nearly 4 minutes. Marcus's expression remained controlled. 4 minutes is a long time when uncertainty has already ended. Laura Mitchell glanced toward the sealed folder. On the passenger seat. Then this was not a failure to verify. Evelyn nodded. It appears to have been a decision to disregard verification. Nolan stepped closer. Director Brooks, there is more. Cole turned toward him. You need representation before you start making accusations. Evelyn faced Cole. He will be advised of every procedural right. You will not advise him what to remember. Nolan drew a slow breath. This was not the first time the reason for a stop changed after the driver questioned it. Pike looked at him sharply. You are trying to protect yourself. No, Nolan said. I am describing what I saw. The words came quietly, but they carried the weight of years spent avoiding them. There were reports where the body camera did not match the written explanation. Sometimes the original reason was removed before the report was submitted. Evelyn opened her notebook. How many reports? Nolan hesitated. I know of 6. The number settled over the roadside. 6 reports meant 6 people whose lives might have been shaped by words written after the truth had already been recorded. Marcus did not look satisfied. He looked toward the folder that had brought him to the confidential meeting. Were those drivers connected to the complaints in that file? Nolan nodded slowly. Some of them. Were most of them black? Nolan lowered his eyes. Yes. Cole shook his head. That proves nothing. We patrol the same neighborhoods every night. Marcus turned toward him. A pattern does not disappear because each incident has been given a separate excuse. Pike moved closer to Cole. We should not continue without counsel. Evelyn nodded. You will not be questioned further tonight. You will also be transported separately, and you will not coordinate statements. She instructed the investigators to preserve every report connected to the 6 stops Nolan had identified, including original versions, edited versions, camera files, dispatch entries, and supervisor approvals. Marcus then faced Nolan. Why did you remain silent? Nolan looked toward the flashing lights reflected in the dark window of the patrol car. Because I thought speaking up would make me the problem. Marcus's voice remained quiet. And what did silence make you? Nolan took several seconds before answering. Part of it. The admission did not make him innocent. It made him honest enough to begin being accountable. Marcus nodded once. Then your statement must include every time you chose silence, not only every time they chose misconduct. Nolan agreed. As supervisors prepared separate vehicles for the 3 officers, Cole looked back at Marcus. You are going to destroy our careers over 12 minutes. Marcus met his gaze across the wet pavement. No, Sergeant. The investigation will determine what your careers were built on long before those 12 minutes began. The vehicles carrying Cole, Pike, and Nolan left the roadside one at a time, each traveling toward a different administrative location under separate supervision. The mist had nearly disappeared, but the highway still reflected the emergency lights in long bands of red and blue. Evelyn Brooks remained beside the patrol car while investigators completed the first evidence inventory. The 3 sealed badges were removed from the hood, labeled, and placed into separate locked containers. Every camera received its own evidence number. Every radio transmission was copied from the original communications system. Every terminal search was preserved with its timestamp intact. Nothing would depend on memory alone. Laura Mitchell reviewed the preliminary dispatch log beneath the raised rear door of the command vehicle. The registration and identification were confirmed 4 minutes before the detention, she said. The supervisor request was entered before the handcuffs were used. Evelyn looked toward Marcus. The record also shows that Cole instructed Nolan not to broadcast the executive command designation. Marcus stood beside his black sport utility vehicle, the dry coat Laura had offered now resting across his shoulders. Was any stolen vehicle report connected to my registration? No, Evelyn replied. Was there any mismatch between the license, photograph, identification, and vehicle assignment? No, Marcus looked through the passenger window at the sealed folder. The answers were simple. What had happened after those answers was not. Evelyn issued an immediate preservation order covering every report, body camera file, dispatch entry, terminal search, and complaint connected to the 3 officers during the previous 3 years. Local supervisors would not be permitted to alter, replace, or remove any record while the independent review remained active. Laura added a second directive requiring outside examination whenever a stop reason had changed after initial contact, whenever a camera had stopped unexpectedly, or whenever a written report conflicted with electronic evidence. Begin contacting every complainant connected to those records, Marcus said. Tell them their cases are being independently reviewed. Promise no particular outcome. Pressure no one to participate. Give them a direct number outside the local chain of command. Evelyn entered the instruction into the incident log. That could expand the investigation far beyond tonight. Marcus met her eyes. Then let it expand. A narrow review would only protect the pattern. An investigator opened the sealed folder under documented conditions and confirmed that Cole, Pike, and Nolan appeared across multiple complaint files. Nolan's name was not always listed as the primary officer. In several cases, he had arrived as backup, witnessed conflicting explanations, or signed reports without challenging what the recordings showed. Laura read the summary in silence. That explains why all 3 badges were secured, she said. Marcus nodded. Different levels of responsibility still require separate review. He did not ask that Nolan be excused because he had finally spoken. He did not ask that Cole or Pike be punished before the evidence was examined. Justice would mean less if it copied the same habit of deciding the conclusion first and building the record afterward. Evelyn closed the folder and secured it inside the weatherproof case. Independent interviews begin tonight. The historical review begins in the morning. Marcus looked down the highway where the local patrol cars had disappeared. The people in those complaints have already waited long enough. Behind him, an investigator locked the final evidence container. The sound was quiet, almost ordinary, but it marked a permanent change. The officers no longer controlled the story through rank, reports, or silence. The preserved timeline now belonged to the truth. 6 months later, the rainy roadside stop had become the first confirmed chapter in a much larger investigation. Independent reviewers examined 3 years of body camera recordings, dispatch logs, mobile terminal searches, written reports, and complaint files connected to Cole, Pike, and Nolan. 48 traffic stops received renewed scrutiny. 12 reports contained serious inconsistencies. 8 drivers had presented valid identification that officers later described as questionable, incomplete, or suspicious. Most of those drivers were black men traveling through neighborhoods where someone had decided they did not belong. Investigators also discovered that several original stop reasons had been changed after camera files were uploaded, while complaints were closed without anyone reviewing the entire recording. Cole and Pike were removed from service after separate administrative proceedings found repeated dishonesty, improper detention practices, and attempts to interfere with recorded evidence. Their cases were referred to the appropriate state authorities for additional review. Nolan's outcome was different, but it was not easy. He served a formal suspension, lost eligibility for promotion during the review period, and returned only under strict supervision. He testified in every reopened case connected to his knowledge and acknowledged each moment when loyalty to his unit had outweighed his duty to the public. Cooperation did not erase his participation. It gave the truth a witness. On a clear Saturday morning, Marcus entered the Maryland State Police Training Academy without an escort. A new class of recruits sat before him in pressed uniforms, their badges not yet issued. Along the rear wall sat several people whose complaints had been reopened: a high school teacher, an auto mechanic, a college student, and a father who had been stopped while returning from his daughter's school performance. Marcus did not stand on the raised platform. He stood at floor level beside them. "Some of you have heard what happened on that highway," he began. You may believe the lesson is to be careful because the person you stop could hold a powerful position. The room became still. Marcus looked toward the complainants. That is the wrong lesson. He paused beside an empty display case where the recruits would eventually receive their badges. The law did not become important because the detained man was the state police chief. It was important every time an officer stopped someone who had no title, no command vehicle, and no direct line to people who could force the truth into the open. A recruit in the front row slowly lowered his pen. Marcus continued, "A badge does not tell the public who must surrender their dignity. It tells the officer who must remain accountable. Your character will be tested most when you believe no supervisor is watching and no influential person will challenge your version." After the session, the reopened complainants met with investigators in a nearby conference room. Improper citations were withdrawn. Official findings were corrected. Written apologies were issued. New policies required immediate supervisory review whenever a stop reason changed, whenever a camera stopped unexpectedly, or whenever a written report conflicted with electronic evidence. Outside the academy, Nolan waited near the stone steps. "Chief Calloway," he said, "I used to think loyalty meant protecting the officers beside me." Marcus studied him for a moment. Loyalty to the uniform means protecting what it represents, even from the person wearing it. Nolan nodded. There was no simple forgiveness in the answer, only a responsibility he would have to prove every day. Marcus walked toward the parking lot, where the black sport utility vehicle from that rainy night waited beneath the morning sun. Months earlier, 3 officers had believed handcuffs could silence one black man. Instead, they had locked years of misconduct into evidence, and the truth had finally found the key.